Ms. Gaines, I want to start with you. Thank you for your courage in being here today. Thank you for your courage and advocacy for women. You have been subjected to an unbelievable amount of abuse. You talk about intimidation, threats of violence. You have suffered it. I want to put up here a picture so everybody can see it. This was the welcome you were treated to at San Francisco State University just a couple of months ago when a mob assembled where you were supposed to speak, I believe for over 3 hours, screamed, threatened you, barricaded you in a room. Do I have that basically correct?
Yes, I was held for ransom for 3.5 hours by hundreds of these protesters, as you see on the board. They demanded that I had to pay them money if I wanted to make it home to see my family safe again.
Today, we're diving into a raw and emotional exchange on Capitol Hill. Former NCAA swimmer Riley Gaines went head-to-head with Senator Josh Hawley to expose the deep struggles and harassment she faced when competing against a transgender athlete. Senator Hawley opened by acknowledging Riley's courage and dedication.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the witnesses for being here. Ms. Gaines, I want to start with you. Thank you for your courage in being here today. Thank you for your courage and advocacy for women. You have been subjected to an unbelievable amount of abuse. You talk about intimidation, threats of violence. You have suffered it. I want to put up here a picture so everybody can see it. This was the welcome you were treated to at San Francisco State University just a couple of months ago when a mob assembled where you were supposed to speak, I believe for over 3 hours, screamed, threatened you, barricaded you in a room. Do I have that basically correct?
Yes, I was held for ransom for 3.5 hours by hundreds of these protesters, as you see on the board. They demanded that I had to pay them money if I wanted to make it home to see my family safe again. The law enforcement in San Francisco, I respect, and I think law enforcement is what's brave, not me, and I respect all law enforcement, but the law enforcement I was met with in San Francisco, in my opinion, failed miserably in effectively doing their job. They had mentioned that it was not ideal for them to be seen as anything other than an ally to this community. And that was made very obvious in the treatment and effectiveness of removing me safely from that situation.
Why were you threatened and barricaded into a room and held for ransom for hours on end? I mean, what was it you were saying that was so terrible?
I was invited to speak on my experience of my senior year in competing against a male. Nothing opinionated about what I shared. It was sheerly the exact lived experience of what me and my teammates and fellow competitors dealt with. And so I spoke. After my speech, there was, of course, a lot of protesters in the room, which I'm totally fine with people protesting. It's their right to protest. But what I'm not fine with is when it does turn violent in the way that it did. Because protesters afterwards, they rushed into the room. They turned off the lights. They rushed to the front. Myself and others were assaulted, and that's ultimately when I was held for hostage for 3.5 hours.
It's just unbelievable, unbelievable. Thank you for your courage in the midst of that. Let's talk a little bit about the message that you were sharing, and you started to talk about it in your opening statement. Just tell us about your experience, because nobody can question your experience. I don't think anybody sitting at the table, and certainly nobody at this podium, has had the experience that you have had. You were talking about just the incredible surprise, shall I say, to put it gently, of finding a biological man, a 6'4" biological man in your locker room and having to accept that without being asked about it, without being told about it even. What was that like for you? Tell us about that.
Again, we only became aware we would be undressing next to a man was when we had to see a man undressing while we were simultaneously undressing. And so I immediately left the locker room and I went up to one of the officials on the pool deck and I said, what are the guidelines to allow a man into our locker room? I know the guidelines for the competition, but what are the guidelines for the locker room? And he so nonchalantly said back, oh, we actually got around this by making locker rooms unisex. And so I'm thinking to myself in these brief moments, first and foremost, you just admitted this is a male by acknowledging how you had to change your rules to make the locker rooms unisex. You acknowledge that we do not share the same sex, first and foremost. Secondly, unisex?
For her, this wasn't just recounting an experience, it was about standing up for women who feel forced into silence. Riley shared a harrowing incident at San Francisco State University where protesters barricaded her in a room, screaming, threatening, and even demanding ransom to let her go. She was stuck in that room for hours, surrounded by people who sought to intimidate her into submission. Law enforcement stood by, hesitant to be anything but allies to the crowd. But the harassment didn't stop there. Riley described the shock of competing against a biological male, a 6'4" athlete whose presence was never communicated to her or her teammates in advance. In one unforgettable moment, she walked into her locker room and saw him undressing beside her. Startled, she confronted an official, only to be told the space was made unisex. This wasn't just uncomfortable, it was a clear violation of privacy and a dismissal of Riley's rights as a female athlete. Senator Hawley highlighted another unsettling reality. Riley and her teammates were instructed to remain silent about the situation. Schools, coaches, and even the NCAA warned athletes not to discuss the challenges they faced. Riley explained how this forced silence made her feel erased. Senator Hawley ended by giving Riley a chance to respond to a recent statement by transgender swimmer Leah Thomas, who accused Riley of using the guise of feminism to mask transphobic beliefs. Riley passionately defended feminism's original intent, to honor and uplift women based on their unique strengths and capabilities. She stated that redefining feminism to silence women was ironically a form of mansplaining. Riley Gaines' powerful testimony sheds light on the challenges female athletes are facing in today's rapidly changing sports landscape. The threats, intimidation, and forced silence reveal a system that isn't just allowing but enforcing inequality. Riley's courage and resilience remind us of the importance of standing up for what's right, even when the world tries to silence us. So, what do you think? Are women's sports and spaces being protected, or are these voices of concern being stifled? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching.